My name is Hannah Hostick. It's a pleasure to welcome you to today's joint program between the Friends of the Sterling Road Library and the Hollywood Historical Society. It's a win-win for both organizations. We are so pleased to have participants from both organizations involved and watching. Karen, it's all yours.
Hi, thank you, Hannah. Good afternoon. My name's Karen Albertson, the Executive Director of the Hollywood Historical Society. Today, Dr. Joan Mickelson, our Archives Chairwoman, will take you on a guided tour of our research center, which is located behind the Hammerstein House at 1520 Polk Street. And you're going to enjoy it. It's a wonderful tour, and she will teach you how we do the research when people call and ask for our help. Joan, go right ahead.
Welcome to the Hollywood Historical Society's Research Center. I'm Joan Mickelson, and I will be your guide today for the secrets of our archive, which of course shouldn't be secret. So come on in. Let me introduce our Research Center volunteers. We have Jean Morford and Leslie Leanne. First, I'd like to give you a brief introduction to the Hollywood Historical Society. Some 50 years after Joseph Young founded Hollywood itself, a group of longtime citizens established the Society in 1974 in order to bear witness to the importance of the city's history. At that time, this archive of objects was begun. Why was this done? According to the American Association for State and Local History, to which we belong, history organizations acquire, protect, and preserve collections that provide evidence of the past and hold them in trust for the benefit of the public. But our mission isn't simply to preserve them. We try often to bring these objects to the public by means of programs like this lecture and publications such as our books. With more space, we could do exhibitions. All this is to help educate the public about Hollywood and its place in history. So now let me show you some of the prime sources right here in this room that provided documentation for these books, such as the biography of Joseph Young, a later history of the city, Virginia Tennyx's earlier history of the city, and Kitty Oliver's Race and Change in the Hollywood area, as well as providing factual answers to you when you phone or email us with questions about Hollywood history. Our oldest documents come from J.W. Young himself and his Hollywood Land and Water Company, and include his Hollywood Reporter and his Salesman's Book of Photos. First, the Reporter. The issues date from April 15, 1922 to 1927. This is where you need to come over.
Okay.
I could say that, that's all right. Somebody's taking a picture. These newsletters represent the earliest documentation about Hollywood we have located, other than some news articles. In them, Young spokesman, editor Oliver Bamer, describes the city's ongoing development using dates, maps, plans, and he even names early buyers and their addresses. Facts that I included in my two books, and Virginia Tennyx and her history as well, are from these prime sources. As you can see, these 100-year-old newsletters are very fragile. Part of the duties of a curator or archivist is care of the objects in their collection. Curator means caretaker. These, some 22 of them, came to us bound tightly with string. After removing that, each issue has been placed in an archival quality folder and all together are in a protective box. Here's an example of how I used them. This often reproduced photo of President Warren Harding being greeted by the Land and Water Company sales force led me to wonder why Joseph Young wasn't in that photograph. The answer is in the reporter. He was away on business in Long Beach, California. It really didn't make a lot of sense to have President Harding shaking all these hands. This is Mr. Harding behind the hat, and there's a woman, saleswoman there, and no Young. The article also says that after Harding was told that the streets were named for U.S. presidents, he was asked if the circle, that then was just called the Circle, could be named for him, and he agreed. So the circle was named for President Harding before his death, not afterwards. Now, of special interest, note this issue. The date of the issue is July 1923. It is about Liberia, announcing Liberia. This is the source for all subsequent mentions of the creation of Liberia. Young had a large contingent of black workers building his city. They had come over from the Bahamas and were living around Dania, working in the tomato fields and packing houses. But blacks couldn't live in Hollywood once it was incorporated due to the Jim Crow state segregation laws. This was not Young's segregation law, it was a state law. Blacks could not live in an incorporated city. White city. Young's reaction was to plan Liberia to be an incorporated all-black city. Unfortunately, following the 1926 hurricane, Young wasn't able to carry out many of his plans, including further development of Liberia. Now, the other early source that I mentioned were the salesman's books. They came in two sizes, the big one and then a little pocket size. Young had salesmen all over the eastern U.S., even in Canada, and to help them sell the city, salesmen were given an album of photos to show the city being developed. He would have buildings going up. That's the water plant, some hotels. There's the country club. So these pictures were, a good sales tool for the salesmen all over. And then the larger ones, I don't know, these weren't as easy to carry. Oh, here we have the picture of President Harding once again, so he could brag that the president had been to Hollywood. Then we have homes, various homes done in the Mission Revival style, particularly the arch and the chimney. This is our country club where Mr. Young and Lena Young were dancing. This is our beautiful railroad station, the most beautiful in the state of Florida, and they tore it down to widen the road.
But it's stunning.
This was a plan for the swimming pool that didn't get built, and here it is under construction. And that's a private home. This is as I say, Young showed everything that was going on in the city, so here's his electric and water plant with all the machinery inside. Here are some dredges used for building the lake section. We had to dredge out the lakes to create them. He had a lot of dredges and they were quite costly. This is a view of Hollywood Boulevard looking east in April of 1925. This is the garage, which is the oldest building in Hollywood, still standing. And you're looking down to the Parkview Hotel, and this is the Great Southern Hotel. Is that enough? Most of all the familiar photos of Hollywood that you see were taken originally from 1922 to 1926 for the salesman's albums. And the photographer, to give him credit, was Bobby Yale. And he had such wonderful detail and clarity. Now, another good source that I just mentioned was Virginia Tennyx History, published in 1960 as a hardcover. People seem to be familiar with the hardcover. Probably it's in libraries. That's long out of print. That was published in 1960. But the book was reprinted as a paperback, and the Hollywood Historical Society is now the only source for these new copies. We sell these. Virginia, who was here in 1924, had access to the reporters and the salesmen's books. She also had access to city records from the 30s and 40s, which are mostly now lost. So this is a very these are our important sources. And then from about 1943 to the end of the 20th century, Hollywood had its own comprehensive daily newspaper, the Hollywood Sun-Tattler. Of course, we have bound volumes for most issues. That's the actual newspaper, bound up weekly and monthly. Of course, they aren't searchable. So if you're looking for a specific story, you'll need to know the month and year it happened. We're happy to help you find your info, but please note while you're looking, you'll probably be very distracted by the ads. They're wonderful to see what things cost back then. Now, another resource that I found invaluable really, are the series of 22 oral histories gathered by reporter Don Cuddy in 1976 from people who were here in the 1920s, and especially those who went through the terrifying 1926 hurricane. Cuddy had an outline of questions about life in Hollywood to guide the interviews, so they weren't just random people were talking randomly. However, each subject had a different response, as you can imagine. These interviews were taped on a little tape, literally, and then transcribed by secretaries who put a listening device on their ear, and they had a foot pedal, and they would listen to the talking and type it down. And these are the original taped transcriptions. As I was reading them a decade or so ago, I decided I would retype them. Excuse me. On a computer and add some footnotes, because when someone was talking, they might mention a person by first or last name, and it wasn't clear maybe who it was talking about, so I would put in footnotes that would explain who the person was or maybe give a date or a street address. But the original is here, and then the retyping. Some of them make illuminating reading, particularly Lena Young. This is who I'm pointing to. Lena Young was the wife of Young's friend Ralph, and the people were not related at all, just another Young family. Lena describes meeting the Youngs in Indianapolis before coming to Hollywood. Then Cuddy asked, "To the best of your knowledge, how did Mr. J.W. Young talk your husband into coming to South Florida?" She says, "Well, he had called him to come down here and advise him about the golf course. And one night we were over at the country club and I was dancing with Mr. Young. We knew the family very well. And he said, 'I have a little fire going in my brain and I want you to add a little fuel to it.' And I said, 'What do you mean?' And he said, 'Well, I want Ralph Young down here and I'm going to have him.' And Ralph Young became a vice president of Hollywood Land and Water Company. J.W. knew what others wanted, what he wanted, and others described how difficult it was to resist his piercing gaze, not to mention his projected belief in their successful future together. Lena Young's interview continues up through J.W.'s death in 1934. It's a very touching narrative. Whatever else you've read about Young's death, Lena Young's story is the accurate one. And another interview filled with facts is my father's, Tony Mickelson, who worked for J.W. first in Indianapolis in 1919, Then came down to Hollywood, one of the first 12 men. And then he went up to Old Forge, New York with Young. And my father had a remarkable memory, so I have used my father's interviews in my own books. And you're welcome to come and read any of and all of these here in the Research Center. What else do we have? Well, many queries we get are about homes and buildings, in particular their historical status. We are able to document every building that stood in Young's Hollywood before the 1926 hurricane by means of a series of site files. And these are pages from a site file, which I'll tell you about. The site files were collected by the state of Florida in the 1980s. The site files contain sheets contain photos. They describe the building's construction materials and the owners if known. This particular home was the home of Jane and Floyd Ray, who were the partners of Ham Hammerstein in the Flamingo Groves. It's a beautiful home, and it's written up in these site files, and we have many others like that. My objection to these 1980s site files is that any home constructed in a certain style, such as this, is described as mislabeled as Mediterranean. Young had a strict building code which included architectural styles. He only allowed Mission Revival, Southwestern Adobe, and Spanish, not the rest of the Mediterranean. No Greek, no Roman, no French or say Egyptian. Moorish, yes, but that was pretty much Spanish. You'll note that the first two I've mentioned, California Mission Revival and Southwestern Adobe, are American architecture. Those are strictly American styles that Young had observed while living in Long Beach, California at the height of the Mission Revival period from 1902 to 15, and he clearly admired it. So far I've mentioned our general overall collections. For specific information, we have 12 file cabinets of people files and 14 cabinets of subject files. Under subjects, for example, you might find schools, churches, police, golf courses, the beach, Riverside Military Academy, and so on. The information isn't generally comprehensive. It's chiefly photos and clippings. It's all material that was donated to the Historical Society. And those of us volunteering here in recent years have also added people and subject info. For the people files, I found some of my South Broward High School classmates, stories from people who were named Hollywood pioneers, local business people, and so on. Here's one that caught my attention. Recently, there has been a vogue of claiming Chicago-Miami gangster Al Capone for Hollywood, but he never, in fact, lived here. At the same time, and oddly overlooked today, was another criminal organization headed by Meyer Lansky, such as a member such as Vincent Jimmy Blue Eyes Allo. This is Jimmy Blue Eyes Allo. From the mid-30s to 1950, Lansky, Allo, and their company maintained rather well-known gambling establishments such as the Plantation, Green Acres, the Colonial Inn, and Club Boheme, or Morton Downey Supper Club. I was there when I was 14. And all of these were in Hallandale. The operators, Jack Lansky, Allo, and others, lived quietly in Hollywood. Allo was written up in the Miami Herald after he died, where he was described as charming and intelligent, and was quoted as remarking that he and Lansky had been in the beer business and the gambling business. They stayed away from drugs, and he said nearly everything they did before 1950 was now legal. And this is his home, still standing on South Lake. He lived there for 40 years. So what else is here? Well, an important resource, very much in progress now, is our Past Perfect database, currently being expertly managed by fellow volunteer Leslie Lee Yen. While the ideal for every archive and museum is to have the collection completely available digitally, few of us older archives have reached that perfection. We're caring for tens of thousands of items here. However, as there are now, as of now, some 900 items, chiefly photos and postcards, already entered. You can focus on that now. To make the database both informative and searchable takes several steps. First, someone, generally me, writes up a worksheet. You don't need to focus on this. It's just the idea that you have to write up a worksheet. Then Leslie creates a record and enters the data from the worksheet onto the screen. And she then scans the image front and back as well. We're careful to note even small details in these century-old photos, which may be the best source of information about an element. For example, a photo showing the circle, and here is a very early photo of the circle. So here you see the first hotel, the Parkview, the Country Club, and over here is the Great Southern Hotel. And back here, you can see the lake section, the lakes being created as the lakes are draining. So, and here's a later version of the circle. This is probably in the 40s. This is the Parkview Hotel. We're looking the other way. And here's again the Great Southern. So what I'm trying to say is, if this is listed just as the circle, you wouldn't know what else was in the photo. So when we write it up, we add the Parkview Hotel, the Great Southern, the lake section. Anything else of interest? Back here is a little bandstand. We have postcards of it. It faced south. That's the first one. The others were built more in this part of the circle. So these have much detail that tells us a lot, and we want to capture that in our database information. We also have maps, postcards, and printed artwork. I mentioned maps. If you've heard me talk, you've probably seen this map. It's an enlargement. It appears in a lot of handouts that we have, and I use it because it shows this. I can describe the city as Young originally envisioned it, with the boulevard intersected by the three circles. I'll put this down. The heads of the lakes, which he created, matching the circles, and you would drive out, circle around, and come back, and you could drive around the lakes. And there was a vista at either end, a big beach hotel and the other big hotel at the other end. That's what I use this map for. We have a lot of other maps. We haven't really documented maps. They're waiting for help on that. And I mentioned postcards. This is now history. It's the port with the four smokestacks. Well, they're gone now. So this is historical, even though it's a fairly new postcard. And here, of course, is Johnson Street with the band shell. And that's changed completely. So we have several hundred postcards, chiefly from before 1960. If you have postcards from the 50s forward and would like to donate them, we'd love to see them. Remember, it must relate to Hollywood. Although sometimes we trade with other historical associations. Someone gave us a big stack of postcards that included really old ones of Key West. We sent those to Key West and they had not seen them. They were pleased to have them. And others have sent us postcards of Hollywood. We trade around. I mentioned printed artwork. So what we have here, and this is another example of the worksheet. This poster or flyer was from the Hollywood Land and Water Company. Young used this sort of thing to advertise his city. This serigraph was reproduced as an ad in the Literary Digest, December 19, 1925. It shows the open roof of his country club with its glass brick dance floor that was lighted below. This is so exciting because we knew all that, but we'd never had a picture. The older ones were all black and white, showing the lighted glass bricks. So that one was used as an advertisement in the Literary Digest. This beautiful print is by an artist named Carol Sadowski. It's a color lithograph dated 1987, and it's numbered 152 over 250. And of course, I should tell you that it's J.W. Young's mansion in case you didn't catch that. Since it is a numbered print, that means there are 151 others. So if you love it, go online and see if you can find another one of the prints for yourself. And then not everything is, well, here's another party. That's a party. This is a party. This is distracting. I'll move it. Margaritas in Paradise. This was for the Women's, October 2015. It's announcing a gala for the Women's Club. Maybe we'll be able to have parties like this again soon. This is the dancing courtyard of the Golf and Country Club. So you can see the glass bricks that were lit from below. And at the back of the colonnade is where the orchestra sat. And then the roof could roll over. But I think mostly it was kept open. You might ask where we store all this material. That, of course, is a growing concern, but besides the metal file cabinets that I mentioned, we have several dozen archival storage boxes. For example, the ones along here, but also we have them all behind here. These are archives of this particular group, says William Zinkel collection. Bill Zinkel was, of course, the mayor and then state senator, and he came in himself when he brought in this material for us. It was before he died, of course. Scrapbooks. These are a problem for archives. They take up a lot of space, for one thing. But mostly, please, if you think of donating a scrapbook, be sure that the photos in it are documented. Date, person, place. Otherwise, it's just a picture and really doesn't help the historians. And it would be great if the covers were removed. They take up a lot of room and they'll eventually be removed when we scan and digitize the contents of the scrapbook. Now, about the typewriter. This belonged to Curator Emeritus Patricia Smith, who initially pretty much collected, definitely organized, and sorted all the material that you see here, and this was all before computers. We recall her tapping away at her lists and labels, so it seems fitting to keep this as historical. Thank you. That ends my talk, but I will now go live and be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Go on to the Historical Society's website and you'll find a reference to all the books that we sell. We have everything, all the books on Hollywood.
Joan, I have a personal question. I'm so interested. Your mother was a flapper. Can you just talk a little about that for a minute?
Well, if you knew the 20s, you'd know right off. She had just graduated from college and hadn't really decided what to do. So her brother was actually down here as one of the engineers. So she came down, and Mother wore
knee-length dresses. She had her hair in a flapper bob, and she wore those hats, and she wore beads, which I could wear. I still have her beads. And she went to parties, but she wasn't married to my father at the time. He'd been in the Navy during the war. They had different backgrounds. And she just had a lot of fun in the 20s.
Amazing. All right. Are there any other questions? You can feel free to ask them, not wait to type them in. Okay, we have another question from Jane.
I think Joni should mention her mother's school. It's an important.
Well,
her girl turned educated the town.
I'm going to out Jane. Jane and I were college roommates. So she's asking questions. She knows a lot. My mother started a school when I was 2 or 3. She didn't know what to do with me. So all my little friends came over. Mother put a wooden floor. We had an acre of land over in the Little Ranches. She put down a wooden floor and started a dance school. And all the little kids, boys and girls, came over and took, kid dances. And that was successful. So she went on and built a building that was a school. And the school eventually had about 100 pupils at a time, and it went from kindergarten. She didn't do nursery school after that. It was kindergarten through tutoring in high school. She had a few people that went right through her school and graduated from it, but mostly by the high school, they would go somewhere else. And she needed a first grade teacher, so she hired her mother, my grandmother, who was apparently the best first grade teacher in Hollywood. And people would say, don't let her go till my child comes. I don't know that I've written too much about it, but it's probably in one of the books I've written. But it went from about 1930 sometime to 70, something like that.
Joan, you mentioned the Little Ranches. Where is that? In what area?
Okay. The Dixie Highway, which, as I said, went through what became Hollywood. And it had been built by Carl Fisher to bring people down from Indianapolis and Chicago down to Miami, where he was building Miami Beach. So Young put started the city to the east of that area on the boulevard, and just to the west on the boulevard, from the boulevard to Johnson Street, were half-acre lots. And the idea was that you could maybe grow food or something. That never happened at all. People like my father immediately bought 2, so we had an acre. And other people just like space. They liked land. A lot of the people that worked for Young actually moved out to the Little Ranches. I think they still have the half-acre lots. But that's where they are, where it was.
Joan, there are a few more questions. Are there any particular resources that the Historical Society is interested in acquiring?
Do you have something in mind? I'm not sure what I personally would like a building so we could have a museum. You need the space, like the size of a downtown storefront, not a building that's already a house with rooms. I'm a museum person. I worked in museums for 30 years. That's why I want a museum. You start with a big empty space, and then you can move panels in, and we could do exhibitions on most of the topics we're talking about today. We have the documentation to set it up. We have people that we could come in and write and lecture. So I think Hollywood needs a historical museum. And I'm sorry, the Historical Society, which was started in 1974, they talked about getting a building, but they never bought one. And that's really a shame. So that's what I would like. But otherwise, we're interested in anything people have that is connected to Hollywood that's not huge, because you see, we have a space problem. But any kind of documentation, you can get to us through the website or our email and tell us what you have. Don't bring it in until you tell us. We might have the postcard or something. And eventually we'd like to have more staff for Karen, who is now our executive director. So there are more things that we could do. I think this could be I worked in another historical museum up in Massachusetts. We started with me, and I immediately hired a curator, and she and I did our own typing. But it's now, it was 140 years old. It was Massachusetts. They now have a wonderful museum and program going. So, and that was only 30 years ago. So it could happen, but everybody has to get behind it and help us out.
Okay, well, just based on the fan mail you're getting in this chat today, I don't know. I've never seen anything like this in our presentations. Really, people are so appreciative of your knowledge and all that you shared today. And I'm in awe that you put Justin's baby to sleep. Justin, I don't know how that happened, but I'm watching this baby who was full of life and now is sleeping very
Anyway.
Oh, really? Oh,
And my son, Justin. I can't like him.
The sound of your voice. David, we'll take your question, and then we need to end for today. So, David, you're
all right. Thank you.
Sure.
I had mentioned this on Facebook once recently. I wondered if what is being built now, a replica of the Great Southern Hotel, at least 3 sides of it, could some of that space be used for the Hollywood Historical Society as a new headquarters?
I haven't seen the spaces. I have no idea. And again, it's a private building, and we need to not be, a temporary guest of some other organization, certainly not a commercial organization. We need to have our own independent. We are a nonprofit, independent group. So we need, we could rent space somewhere or something, but I wouldn't want to be we don't need a handout. We need to be respected for what we are and have a serious museum space. It doesn't have to be huge.
Now, the Hammerstein house, that's not part.
No, that's not a museum. That would not work. That's already full of furniture. It's their home. It's set up as their home. The rooms are small. They're up and down stairs. It's great. It's a home. It's not a museum.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, right. Yes, I'm supposed. Well, you're going to say.
If I have time, you go ahead and say it.
Apparently, I'm being told. I can tell you that the Hammerstein House will be the subject of our next talk next month, and some other people will be leading you through that. May 16th. And if you're a member, any member will get a notification, or it'll be on Facebook.
And Dr. Joan, may I say something?
Yeah.
The First National Bank building, we're going to have a small room there.
No, we're not. No, we're not. No, we're not. We're going to
change their mind.
I never wanted it. You can't have it separate from your materials. Everything needs to be together. If I wanted to suddenly do an exhibition on the hurricane, I would like to have all these files where I can pull them out and get them ready to put them on the walls in the same space. To cart things back and forth to a little room downtown, and then you have to have it staffed.
Understood.
And we aren't really set up for that.
I know, and you said it perfectly. We want our own structure. We want our own building.
And
that's
we'd like
not a rental.
Yeah, a little respect for the beginning of the city.
Okay, so a lot of people heard it first here today. A historical event for some of us. Joan, I want to thank not just you, but also Kim Newhouse, who, without her assistance, we would still be trying to figure out how to turn on the video. So, Kim, thank you so much. Thank you all for attending. Enjoy this beautiful day. Stephen, was that a question? We're going to end with one more quick question, Karen. Sorry, wait, Karen, Stephen has a question. Stephen, unmute yourself, but at 2 o'clock, we shut off. So go, Stephen.
I was just saying goodbye.
Oh,
Hi, Steve.
Karen, anything else?
No, I just wanted to tell everyone that the quilting lecture for May 16th has been canceled. The people left town because of COVID. So it is being replaced by our board members presenting a tour of the Hammerstein House, Clarence and Vera's Hammerstein House at 1520 Polk Street, right in front of our building. So we're not allowed to be in there doing tours anymore. So we're going to do it via video.
Great. Thank you all. Have a wonderful Sunday. And we'll see you hopefully at tomorrow night's program for the library and at the Historical Society's program a month from now. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank
Bye,
you.
friends.
Bye-bye, everybody.